0-day brief.
Quote, May 2026. 2 CVSS 9.8 plus exploits. Same ecosystem, same month. Both exploited in the wild. One turned any cPanel user into an admin. The other turned any cPanel user into root one click.
Wow.
Every website, every database, every SSL key on that server. If you run shared hosting or a website sits on it, this is the month the trust model collapsed. Unquote.
I mean, it's incredibly rare to see a briefing document open with that level of sheer alarm.
Yeah.
When you read those words, you're looking at an existential threat to the very foundation of how a massive chunk of the internet operates today.
Right, and welcome in, everyone. Today we are doing a deep dive into exactly that. It's a striking contrast to our last deep dive, where we unpacked Microsoft Defender.
Oh, right, the bodyguard scenario.
Exactly. In that one, we looked at how security software acts like a bodyguard holding a master key. But the ironic twist was that the bodyguard itself became the attack surface.
Right, you compromise the bodyguard, you own the VIP.
Yeah, but today, we're unpacking this fascinating and terrifying briefing titled EP10 Briefing, cPanel's Month from Hell. And we aren't looking at a compromised bodyguard this time.
No, not at all.
We're looking at a scenario where the entire building was basically just designed without locks.
And that reality, it really shatters the core promise of the shared hosting industry. Because, I mean, think about it. The entire economic model of shared hosting is built on one very specific promise to you, the consumer.
Isolation.
Exactly. Isolation. You might be sharing a single physical server with like 300 other small businesses. But if one of your neighbors gets hacked because they forgot to update their WordPress plugins.
Your site is supposed to be perfectly safe.
Right. They stay in their lane. But those two exploits from May 2026, they proved that this supposed isolation was nothing more than a paper wall.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really grasp the scale of this disaster, we have to understand how the cPanel architecture is actually supposed to work, right? And why its foundational logic is flawed. The briefing uses this brilliant hotel keycard analogy to kind of visualize the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. It's crucial because it helps us visualize the privilege separation, or I guess the total lack of it.
Right. So imagine a shared hosting server is a massive hotel. You've got hundreds of guests, and each guest represents one website.
Taking up one room.
Exactly, taking up one room. A standard cPanel account is your room key. It opens your door, room 304, and absolutely nothing else.
Right. And in that same hotel, you have the maintenance staff.
Okay.
These represent the third-party plugins running on the server.
Right.
Tools for backups, caching, security, that sort of thing. Maintenance staff needs slightly elevated permissions.
Because they have to move around the building.
Exactly. They need access to the hallways, the utility closets, the boiler room, just to keep the building's infrastructure running smoothly.
Makes sense. And then you have root access.
Right.
Yeah.
Root.
Root is the front desk key programmer. If you have root access, you can literally print a master key for any door in the entire building.
Yeah, and to take that out of the analogy and put it back onto the metal, root access on a Linux server means you have ultimate authority.
You own it.
You own it. You can manipulate the sudoers file. You can read the cryptographic keys of other users. I mean, you can drop a bash shell and execute commands as the system itself.
So in a real physical hotel, those boundaries are baked into hard firmware, right?
Yes. A guest key opens room 304, period.
Right.
A maintenance key opens the utility closet, sure, but it fundamentally cannot operate the key programmer at the front desk. Those rules just do not bend no matter what series of buttons you press.
But the briefing points out that cPanel's model bends those rules drastically.
Oh, massively.
Instead of hard boundaries, cPanel's architecture essentially relies on implicit trust. It basically says, we trust our contractors. Whatever access a plugin asks for, just give it to them.
Right.
So in May 2026, the industry watched contractors basically walk out of the building with keys that opened every single door.
And that brings us to the first time those rules completely broke down that month. This was CVE-2026-41940.
The native bug.
Right. And the briefing notes it scored a CVSS 9.8.
Which is huge.
It's massive. For those who don't, spend their days reading vulnerability reports, the common vulnerability scoring system caps out at 10. A 9.8 is literally a siren going off in a security operations center.
Yeah, that means the flaw is network exploitable, requires low complexity, and needs absolutely zero user interaction to pull off.
Exactly. And what's most critical to understand here is that this was a failure in cPanel's own native lock firmware.
Meaning an attacker didn't even need a faulty third-party plugin to break the system.
None. Any authenticated user, so any hotel guest with a basic $3 a month room key could just escalate their privileges to maintenance level access using just the base cPanel web interface.
I am still trying to wrap my head around how a basic web interface allows that, though. Like, let's go back to the hotel. How does a guest convince the lock that they're maintenance?
Well, it comes down to a sequence error.
Okay.
Imagine a guest swipes their room card at a specific utility door, but they do it in a very strange, highly specific sequence.
Like swiping halfway, pausing, then swiping again.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Instead of the system looking at the card's identity and firmly saying, look, you're registered to room 304, access denied, the controller gets confused.
It just stumbles.
It totally stumbles over its own logic and concludes, oh, you swiped in that undocumented sequence. You must be a maintenance worker. Here's your hallway access.
Okay, but wait. I have to push back here, though.
Sure.
You and I both know cPanel has been running millions of servers for, what, over 20 years? It's one of the most battle-tested pieces of software on the web.
It really is.
So how does a confused permission check just hand over admin access? Are you telling me nobody in their quality assurance department ever tested for this?
Well, the briefing provides a really sharp insight into the realities of QA testing. QA is notoriously underinvested when it comes to boundary testing. Most software testing simply asks, does the feature work for the user? Can the user reset their password?
Right. They test the happy path.
Exactly. The happy path. It rarely asks, does the permission gate hold when I stress test it from 50 malicious angles at the exact same time?
They aren't testing the malicious path.
Precisely. From a structural standpoint, cPanel's permission model historically treated authorization like a checklist rather than a hard physical boundary.
A checklist.
Yeah, it operates on logic that basically asks, did check A pass? Okay. Did check B pass? Okay, you're authorized.
I see.
But if check A fails in a bizarre way that causes the system logic to accidentally skip straight to check C and you happen to pass check C, the gate just opens.
Wow. So a checklist can be skipped if the logic flow breaks, but a hard boundary, like a locked door without a handle on the outside, cannot. But we aren't just talking about abstract lock systems here. What did this actually look like in the real world when it hit?
Oh, the real world damage was staggering. And immediate. Within 72 hours of this vulnerability dropping into the public domain, threat actors weaponized it.
72 hours.
Yeah. Variants of the Mirai botnet were actively exploiting it across multiple hosting providers. And for context, Mirai is malware that turns Linux systems into remotely controlled bots.
Zombies, basically.
Zombies, which are then used to launch massive distributed denial of service attacks.
Right, taking down other websites using the bandwidth of the infected servers?
Yes, and it wasn't just botnets. The Sorry ransomware started deploying through the exact same vector.
The exact same one?
Yeah, Sorry is a ransomware strain that specifically targets web servers, encrypting databases, website files, and then demanding cryptocurrency to unlock them.
And the briefing notes something wild about that. Some servers were hit by both simultaneously.
The double tap.
Yeah. Mirai would get in first through the sequence error to establish persistence and turn the server into a zombie. Then the Sorry ransomware would follow days later through the same open window.
Right, to actually monetize the breach by locking everything down.
It's literally like having your car stolen and then receiving a ransom note for the stereo they left inside.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Which, highlights a deep philosophical issue in cybersecurity. When a bug like this hits the news, the standard industry response is, well, we issued a patch, update your software and move on.
And they did patch this bug relatively quickly.
They did. But patch it is fundamentally the wrong answer here.
Because the underlying lock shouldn't have been able to confuse a guest for maintenance in the first place, regardless of the sequence.
Bingo. That is not a simple coding mistake. That is a fundamental design problem. The real issue isn't whether they fixed that one specific sequence error.
Right.
The issue is why the authorization boundary was so incredibly soft that a simple logic stumble could erase it entirely.
And if cPanel's own code failing was the earthquake, well, what happened next was the tsunami.
Yeah.
Because the second vulnerability from May 2026 wasn't even written by cPanel. It came from a third-party contractor, and it reveals a structural rot that goes much, much deeper.
You're talking about CVE-2026-48172.
Yes.
This one scored a CVSS 10.00. You literally cannot score higher on the severity scale. It's the definition of a catastrophic failure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This involved the Lightspeed cPanel plugin. Lightspeed is a highly popular drop-in replacement for the Apache web server. So let's take it back to our hotel analogy.
Yep.
Lightspeed is a contractor hired to install a utility closet for caching, basically. A server room designed to make the hotel's Wi-Fi significantly faster.
Right.
And inside this closet, they install a big button labeled Enable Redis Caching.
And for anyone unfamiliar, Redis is an in-memory data structure store. Instead of a web server asking the database for the same information over and over every time someone loads a home page, Redis stores that data in active memory, so the server can just hand it over instantly.
So it's a fantastic, highly demanded feature that makes websites lightning fast.
Very much so.
So having a button that easily turns it on sounds like a great convenience feature. But the button was wired wrong?
Oh, terribly wrong.
Pressing it didn't just turn on the cache, it actually unlocked the front desk key programmer.
It is genuinely astonishing when you look at the mechanics of it.
Yeah, let's break down the actual privilege chain. The Lightspeed plugin contains a function called redisable. It's just a simple toggle switch meant for the user interface. But the plugin's code didn't verify who was clicking the switch.
Any authenticated user could trigger it.
Right. And here is the fatal flaw. When a user toggled that button, the function ran with elevated permissions. It ran as root.
Which begs the question, why on earth does a caching feature need front desk key programmer access?
I was just wondering that.
Why does it need root?
Yeah, if it's just a database cache, why is it talking to the kernel as an admin?
Well, because of how deeply caching integrates into the web server itself. To turn Redis on for a specific user, the Lightspeed plugin has to restart system-level services.
Oh.
It has to tell the main web server process to stop, recognize the new caching rules, and start back up. In a Linux environment, a standard user account is strictly forbidden from restarting system-wide services.
So only root can do that.
Only root. So the plugin developers designed the redisable function to execute as root, out of necessity, just for the feature to work.
But they didn't sandbox the command. The access control didn't enforce a boundary?
Nope.
So an attacker clicks Enable Redis. The function runs as root, but instead of just restarting the web service, the attacker passes a malicious payload through the toggle.
Right.
The system, operating as root, executes the payload and drops a root bash shell for the attacker.
Instantly, an unprivileged user becomes root. And on shared hosting, root means you have absolute control over every single website, every database, every email account, and every SSL private key on the entire physical server.
I mean, put yourself in the shoes of an attacker for a second. Imagine you're poking around the internet and you find some old cPanel credentials sitting in a compromised repeat-config file on some forgotten, outdated WordPress blog.
A scenario that happens literally thousands of times a day.
Exactly. You log into the cPanel interface, you see the Lightspeed plugin icon, you think, sure, let's see what happens if I toggle Redis.
Just clicking around.
Yeah. And 2 seconds later, the server hands you a root shell. You own the entire machine. You aren't sitting in a dark room feeling like a genius hacker who spent weeks cracking a mainframe.
No, you're sitting there looking at your screen thinking, wait, that shouldn't have worked.
Echo.
And what's fascinating here is how the tech industry immediately tried to deflect the blame.
Oh, of course.
The reaction from a lot of folks on forums and social media was, well, that is a Lightspeed bug. Lightspeed wrote the faulty code, don't blame cPanel.
Which is technically an accurate statement regarding who typed the code.
Technically accurate, sure, but functionally irrelevant. Because cPanel's entire plugin model is based on the architectural assumption that third-party code is inherently safe to run at elevated privileges.
Right, there's no sandboxing.
Zero sandboxing between the user space and the root space for these plugins. They completely ignore the principle of least privilege.
Which dictates that a program should only have the bare minimum permissions necessary to do its job and nothing more.
Exactly. If the platform architecture allows a third-party plugin to run as root simply because the plugin asks to, then the ecosystem itself is the problem.
That distinction really changes how we have to look at the entire month. We have 2 maximum severity exploits, 2 entirely unrelated vectors, one native to cPanel, one from a third-party contractor. But they have the exact same catastrophic outcome, an unprivileged user easily escalating to root.
You simply cannot write this off as a single bad line of code anymore.
No, you can't. Which brings us to the underlying economics of why this month from hell was basically inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at the harsh reality of $3 a month shared hosting. For $3 a month, you are not getting a dedicated security team analyzing threat vectors and proactively hunting for zero-day vulnerabilities.
No, definitely not.
Oh.
And 0 days, by the way, are flaws that attackers discover and exploit before the vendor even knows they exist.
Right. For $3, you're getting an automated customer support ticketing system.
Pretty much.
When that Lightspeed zero-day dropped, the briefing explicitly notes that incident response for many of these budget hosting companies consisted of checking if Redis was installed, running an automated script, and just kind of hoping for the best.
And the blast radius of that economic reality is terrifying.
Yeah.
Because shared hosting doesn't just run millions of forgotten hobby blogs about knitting. It runs real, vital infrastructure.
Small local businesses?
Municipal government portals,
Yeah.
law firms handling sensitive client data, medical clinics managing patient intake forms.
And none of which are officially labeled critical infrastructure by any government agency.
No, but they are absolutely critical to the people who rely on them. If a local medical clinic's patient records end up on a ransomware leak site because of a vulnerability in a caching button, that is a human catastrophe.
Yeah, it really is.
And the most heartbreaking part of this entire architecture is that a website owner could do everything perfectly. You could have a flawlessly patched WordPress site, incredibly strong unique passwords, hardware two-factor authentication enabled, and you still get compromised.
Why? Because some neighbor on your shared server, like 3 digital doors down, was running an abandoned Joomla installation from 2019.
Yes, an abandoned installation that allowed an attacker to grab a basic user key and just upgrade it to root.
The neighbor's neglected site becomes the entry point, and the structural flaw in the platform makes it everyone's problem.
Exactly.
But, I want to play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay, go for it.
Because the briefing touches on a massive debate in the tech community regarding how we handle legacy software. Side A, let's call them the pragmatists, they look at this situation and say, let's be realistic. cPanel is a 25-year-old software monolith. It runs a third of the internet's hosting. Legacy code is always going to have bugs. It's unavoidable. Look at Windows or Linux. They have critical legacy bugs discovered all the time. The companies found the exploits, they patched them within 48 hours, and you simply cannot expect modern architectural perfection from a code base that old.
That's the argument, yeah.
Right. They say, if you try to retrofit a 25-year-old architecture with modern sandboxing, you break millions of websites overnight. The backward compatibility is the product.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, I have to counter that pragmatist view forcefully.
Right.
This is not just about bugs happening. This is about structural design debt. The pragmatist argument treats these vulnerabilities as isolated incidents.
Right.
But the entire user-to-root boundary of this massive platform depends on whether a third-party plugin developer remembered to validate permissions on a caching toggle.
That is an insane architectural choice.
So you're saying that issuing a patch is just treating the symptom, not the disease.
Exactly. Patches cannot repay design debt. The disease is that a caching toggle is allowed to talk to the server's kernel as root without an intermediary sandbox. When you have a platform running that much of the internet, and it lacks basic privilege separation between user operations and system operations, you are dealing with a systemic failure.
Even if fixing it causes issues.
Yes. Adding sandboxing might break backward compatibility.
Right.
But the cost of maintaining that backward compatibility is currently being offloaded onto the local law firm whose data gets leaked.
Right.
It is design debt, and we are paying the interest with our personal data.
And it creates a massive accountability vacuum. Think about it. If a bank vault has a foundational design flaw that lets any customer with a checking account walk right into the main safe, the bank is clearly liable, obviously. But when cPanel has a design flaw that lets any user become root, who is legally accountable?
Is it the budget hosting provider who sold the $3 space and didn't monitor the server?
Right. Is it cPanel for designing a platform architecture without sandboxing?
Or is it Lightspeed for writing a faulty button?
Exactly. The legal framework hasn't even begun to catch up to this reality. Everyone points a finger at everyone else, and no one takes responsibility.
Which leaves the end user completely exposed. So let's pivot from the macro debate to what you, the listener, can actually do about this right now, because knowledge is only useful if you apply it.
Very true.
If you are managing a shared hosting server, the practical takeaways from the briefing are clear. You need to immediately check your cPanel versions, check your Lightspeed plugin versions.
You need to dig into your server logs and look for any unexpected redisable toggles or unusual privilege escalations. And honestly, conduct a full audit of your server architecture. Ask yourself how many other plugins are sitting there with root access by default, just waiting for someone to find a flaw in their code.
And if you're just a customer if your website, even a small static personal site, sits on a shared hosting plan, you need to take action today.
This raises an important question you need to ask your hosting provider. Call them. Do not send an email into a support ticketing black hole. Get someone on the phone and ask them one simple sentence.
What's the sentence?
When did you patch CVE-2026-48172 and CVE-2026-41940?
And what if they give you silence? Or if they deflect, use jargon, and try to talk around the question?
Then you have your answer. You have to seriously consider whether saving a few dollars a month on budget hosting is worth sitting in the blast radius of someone else's neglected installation.
Yeah.
You might be paying $3 a month, but the true cost could be your entire digital livelihood.
It really makes you step back and look at the entire internet ecosystem differently. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something outside the technical specifications we've discussed today.
Okay.
Think about the invisible interdependencies that are holding up our digital lives right now. If a highly secure, perfectly managed medical database can be completely brought down just because a total stranger forgot to update a $3 a month hobby blog from 5 years ago,
Wow.
how many other digital hotels are we sleeping in right now that only have the illusion of locked doors? How much of the modern web is built on an honor system we didn't even know we agreed to?
It is a question that should keep anyone who relies on the internet awake at night.
That's our deep dive into the briefing for today. Keep asking the hard questions, keep checking the locks on your own digital doors, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Zero Day Brief.